Good morning. This is Blair with the Live and Learn Gardening channel. I am in Zone 8B, which is kind of a funny thing to say because I'm also in the same zone as like Portland, Oregon, but I am in Austin, Texas, Central Texas, and man, is it a hot summer here. It is supposed to be 108 degrees. It's just unreasonable. I don't know what that is in centigrade, but it's over 40. It's a lot. And there are some things that we do in Texas that are just like different from most other places. Most other places, June, July, that's your best season. It's beautiful out. You're getting your plants are in peak happiness because they're getting the most sun. They're getting great warmth. But in Texas, it just gets a little bit too hot, and we struggle. And I want to walk you through my garden and what's doing well, what I've pulled out, what I've just basically given up on at this point in the season. And I will say this year's a little bit earlier. We're a little after mid-July, and often I'm usually giving up on these things maybe early August. So it's a couple weeks early as far as heat, but it's been 100, not every single day. I think we skipped like 5 or 6 days in there, but it's been 100 degrees since early June, almost every single day. And some of the days it's 104, 105 degrees. And it's not like it's a dry heat either. It's also a very humid heat. So, for instance, right now it's about 80% humidity and already 81, 82 degrees, and it is 9:15 in the morning. So, it's toasty here in Texas right now. And I would say this is a bad summer. Last summer was also kind of rough. Um, but this year, especially after last year and having had some time to think about it and adapt, I've got a little bit different strategy. I think it's working better. Also, we had a slightly cooler spring, a lot more rain in the spring. And so I think the plants got a little bit more support earlier on. And so they're not struggling as much as they were this time last year. Also, maybe I'm just a little bit more prepared after living through last summer. So let's do a quick tour. I'll walk through the things that are working out, the things that aren't, the things that I'm just about to pull out because they're totally done, and the things that are low maintenance and actually thriving in this environment. At least I think thriving. We'll see. All right, let's get started. All right, I know there's a board in the middle of my garden that is actually intentional. I wanted to give you guys a sense of how big these plants are getting. That board is just under 3.5 feet tall, and that right next to it is one of my pepper plants. That's not one of the ones, if you look back at my older videos, that's not one of the ones that was stunted at the beginning. This one over here, which is probably, if we look at the board, somewhere between 2.5 and 3 feet tall. This was one of the stunted plants at the beginning of the year. I just planted it a little bit later than the other ones. The peppers, I think, are going to be a little small. That's just due to the distress this time of year. Oh my gosh, this is crazy. This pepper is scorched, and it's in a lot of shade. That's sun scorch. If you ever see that on your plant, it's actually okay. You'll see it ripens a little sooner around that area. The pepper will be okay, but that's part of the reason I'm letting. You'll see I've got a little bit of jungle going on. I'm letting these plants kind of grow over the pepper plant. I'm actually hoping that'll give them a little extra sun protection. But yeah, so this is I think this was the red bell pepper that I had planted first. So it's easily 4 feet tall. And this is the other, quote unquote stunted pepper plant that I had. Um, this is also doing quite well. It's in practically full shade at this point. Okay, that might not actually be. So see that little guy up there? He's either a stink bug, but usually the baby stink bugs, teenage, roughly, stink bugs travel in packs. There's also, and I need to look him up, there's also a predator that looks a lot like the teenage version of a stink bug that we want, that's good and eats a lot of, I think it's aphids. So I'm going to check before I squish him what he actually is, but he's either a really bad bug or a really good bug. It's always a toss-up. This guy, though, that guy right there, that's pretty sure. Well, he's different than the normal stink bugs in our yard, but I think that's a stink bug. We'll see. And they'll damage the fruit. So anyway, this is my pepper garden, and the peppers are doing just unreal, basically. 4 feet tall, and this is the Ancho Poblano pepper, One thing, and good news, bad news, and I'm sure if you live in a northern climate, you're like, why would this ever be a bad thing? My peppers are turning red so fast um, that it's almost hard to pick them. And though, like, this one's getting like softer, basically. I need to make some mole sauce or something like that. These are a real thin walled pepper. And if they dry out too much, they just, I almost need to turn them into a paste or something. I can't like chop them up and put them in a stir fry or something just because they don't have enough moisture in them because they dry out so quickly because of the summer heat. This particular one, I don't think this gets spicy. Um, Here, I'll check. There's no heat to that at all. But these guys are turning red really quickly, so I probably need to just pick them a lot more frequently. But it'll literally be a day or so, and there'll be a bunch of red ones. Versus for those of you in a northern climate and really anywhere that's not super hot, it can take weeks and weeks for peppers to turn red. And so you're probably wondering what the heck I'm complaining about. Um, this plant is doing amazing. This is basically in, I think, almost full shade. This is just a regular Genoese basil, and it's the only one that isn't just totally shot. And it's starting to get a little bit of stress on it. I think that's sun scald, and we're talking almost full shade here, and that's sun scald. Um, and it's got a little bit of this disease, but I mean, given that it's been 105 degrees, I can't be more happy with the fact that this plant is even still here. I'll show you the rest of my basil later. It's basically all just gone because it's been way, way, way too hot. This basil, this is a really cool basil. This is called cardinal basil. Oh, that's a feather. I was like, what is that? This is cardinal basil. It's doing great. I mean, it's huge, it's beautiful, it's happy. This is in a little bit more sun, but this one is also quite a bit more sun tolerant in general. The only thing I will say about it is I definitely overplanted here. I didn't think the basil would survive this long because usually my basil doesn't survive, through June. Um, but this guy's almost kind of crowding out my shishito peppers over here. Though they're still doing pretty well. I have noticed this time of year the fruit is just not getting as big, and that may be because the plant's a little bit older. That may be just because it's so hot and it's stressed and it's producing smaller fruit. But I have noticed they'll only get, they're probably getting, I don't know, not almost twice as big earlier in the year and a little bit thicker, and they're turning red at this really small stage now. So these shishito peppers are still absolutely amazing. Um, there's a few of them that are, a little bit bigger, but they're overall a lot shorter. Maybe they were, yeah, probably twice that length earlier in the year. They still taste amazing. They're just a little bit smaller, so I have to pick, twice as many to make a dish. But they're still doing really, really well. This plant that's growing on top of them, this is a cucamelon, and it's a volunteer. I had cucamelons planted kind of in an arch between, like an arch over between these two beds last year, and so you'll see there's cucamelon on this side and there's cucamelon on this side. I'm kind of letting it grow. It's a volunteer. Yeah, it looks pretty chaotic because it's growing kind of all over my pepper plants. It looks like a jungle, but considering my pepper plants, even in the fair amount of shade they're in, the peppers are still getting sun scorched. I'm okay with a little bit of extra shade, and these cucamelons really love the summer heat, and so I'm just kind of letting them go. And they volunteered, and they're a strong, happy plant. So hopefully we'll get a few cucamelons on top of, literally on top of our peppers. And if it gets too much, or I see kind of damage from the plant, or too much weight, or something like that, then I'll pull the cucamelon vines off. I've done that with one of the ones that I like, have a love-hate relationship with, is my these guys. These are morning glories down here. I love morning glories, but they can vine so heavily that they put too much weight on the plants. And so that morning glory, I've let it kind of spill off the side, but when it tries to grow on top of my plants, usually I will start pulling it down. Like, that's getting to be a little bit too heavy up here, so I'll probably have to pull this guy down soon, just because it puts, kind of undue pressure on, or undue weight on that plant, which is about to start bearing fruit. There is one more plant in here I planted. If you saw my last video, I planted I think it was my last video, maybe it was 2 videos ago. I planted a watermelon in here. And the watermelons I planted haven't done as well as the cantaloupe. Cantaloupe really seems to do well here. Um, but I did try to it was kind of going off that way, and I don't think it was getting enough sun. So the watermelon's off going this way now, and we'll see if it recovers. I doubt it. It's looking pretty sad. It was in the middle of probably too much shade for a watermelon, even in Texas. These are my green beans. They're somehow still alive. They're not really producing green beans. I get the occasional small one, but they don't seem to be getting to full size. And usually you want to pick them before they get to a certain size, but I don't know if something else is picking them or what. But they're kind of a stunted size right now, and I haven't had a problem with them like actually maturing on the plant. I say that, but yeah, they're like a stunted. This one technically matured on the plant, but there's no beans in it and it's stunted. So I think they're just a little bit too. You'll see a lot of the green beans, even before they get any real size, just kind of peter out. And that's basically hollow. So I think it's just too hot for green beans right now. This is a great example of what normally basil looks like when it's hot like this. Why it's so incredible that my other basil is doing so well. I mean, this that looks like some sort of mildew or mold, fungus, something like that. The plant overall is very sad looking, and it's just too hot, honestly. But the other one's doing so well. I just think it's a tribute to the deeper garden bed and also to the full shade that's in. This spot actually gets a fair amount more sun than the other location, and I've moved this around. It's gotten a lot of sun over time. You will note, if you watch any of my videos before, there is a large absence here. I have taken out all of my tomato plants out. It took me a while to do it. It probably took me like 4 hours one morning to untangle my tomato plants from this whole structure over here. I did leave the cucamelons in here. I can probably pull out all of those stakes. I just haven't gotten around to it yet. I left the morning glories. I left the cucamelon, which you kind of taken over. It's twofold. One, it's a volunteer, and I love to leave volunteers whenever I can. And two, the shade that the cucamelon is providing maybe is not as much as the tomato was, but I do want to shade the soil as much as possible. And this is just giving me that little bit of shade. I don't remember what kind of basil this is. If anybody knows, please tell me. But it's like the most magical, flowery, floral smelling, I think maybe Thai basil. I'm not sure. It's either Thai or holy basil, but wow, the smell is like very therapeutic. I'm not sure if I put this basil in my cooking just because it's such a strong, almost floral flavor, but the smell, I just grab a leaf every time I walk by it and I smell it for a minute or two and I feel relaxed. It's such a therapeutic smell. I absolutely love it. And I think it's Thai. I think it's Thai basil. I'll have to save some seeds. See, there's lots of little seeds on this guy. I probably should also pull those off because once the plant starts forming seeds, it's probably going to kind of let itself go, as it were. So these are my tomatillo plants. I think they're doing okay. I don't know much about tomatillos. I can kind of tell when a tomato plant is going downhill. These definitely have, this is my first year with tomatillos, these definitely have some damage to them, and I don't really think they're setting fruit anymore. It's been, like I said, 100 degrees for weeks and weeks. So I don't think it's possible for them to set fruit in this heat. But the plant seems okay. So I haven't pulled it out yet. There was like one tomatillo on it yesterday, but I just haven't seen any kind of baby fruit setting. So we'll see. Maybe we'll get a cool week somewhere in here and it'll set some more fruit and then they'll be able to mature. But the plant seems okay. I mean, it's definitely not in perfect health, but it's definitely in better health than my tomato plants were. You know it's hot when it's too hot for mint. Even my mint is showing distress. Mint loves like a good hot day, but I think it's just too much even for the mint. It looks a little sad. It looked absolutely beautiful earlier in the season, but it's starting to look really pretty sad. can't actually remember what this plant is called. Maybe amaranth of some kind. Cucumber beetle. But this is doing pretty well. I mean, it's distressed definitely, but it's alive in this bed, which is like one of the most brutal heat beds that I have. I took out the tomatoes. You can see the remainder of the tomato there. This guy's in a little bit more distress, but it's, hey, it's still alive, which is something. Something to be said there. I don't know what's attacking it. My guess would be caterpillars and spider mites, but I don't even know if the caterpillars would be out in this kind of heat. Usually this part of the season it gets so hot, it's usually spider mites because it's just so dry. But what I do have in this bed, and I'm glad I threw it in because it seems to be doing at least okay, is these sweet potatoes. I don't know if I'll get sweet potatoes out of them because it's just so hot. It's really hard to keep this bed well watered. But the sweet potato plants do seem to be somewhat happy. We'll see if we actually get any potatoes out of it, but at least they're covering the soil in this bed. And so this bed isn't just getting baked all summer. At least it's getting a little bit of protection. This tomato plant's interesting. Most of the rest of this was like a red pride. Most of the rest of the tomato plant was just dead, very, very dead. But this guy seemed to want to keep going, so I decided to let it keep going. And we shall see. If you're new to growing blackberries, this might seem a little distressing. This whole stem is dead, and actually that's what's supposed to happen. So these are kind of last year's stems. That's where we had fruit, and blackberries produce fruit every other season, but they actually produce every year. What's happening is this stake will die, and then these green stakes that are, not stakes, I don't know what they're called, but these green, I can't think of the word right now, these green stake stems, whatever it is, they will be the ones that produce the flowers and produce the fruit next year. I will say overall, I think I've got a lot fewer this year than I usually have, but I did move that whole bucket and it's been a really hot year. So I moved that bucket from over here to over there and broke its main stem. So what I'll do in the winter is I'll pull out all of these brown ones and I'll leave the green ones and I'll stake them up so that they're they can go dormant over the winter, and then those will be the ones that produce fruit next year. And I think it'll be a lower fruit year, but that's okay. A lot of my herbs do well because they're kind of shaded in this bed by the stuff that's in this bed. But this year, the stuff in this bed just did not survive long enough to shade them. So, like this oregano plant is in a little bit of distress. Plus, I think this bed's just getting old, and see how it's kind of falling apart here. The soil is leaking out the bottom of this, and I just don't think there's enough soil really in here to support this plant. And I keep putting soil in, and it just keeps draining out. So I think it's more of a structural issue with the bed at this point than necessarily what I'm doing. But these herbs over here are doing okay. This is interesting. So thyme, especially in these hotter climates, it'll get kind of a woodiness to parts of it, but especially the part that's over the edge here, look how healthy that looks. Oh, there's some bugs in there, but overall it looks fairly healthy because it's actually getting some shade in the afternoon, which is, positive. And then this has been here, these chives have been here for literally forever. This is the shadiest corner of this bed. And these chives and then these garlic chives seem to do really well. I think of them as a more cool weather crop. I don't know why, but they actually do really well in Texas. The chives do, as long as they're well watered and they get some amount of shade in the Texas, hot sun. I had to get my stake out again to show you how big this eggplant is. It's at least 4 feet tall. It is huge. And the funny thing about it is I haven't got any eggplants off of it. I think there's a couple of reasons for that. One, there's definitely some pest pressure on it, even though it is so big and seems to be doing, quote unquote, so well. There's a fair amount, if you look at these leaves, there's a fair amount of pest pressure on here. This is, I don't know, probably spider mites. I'm not really sure. We are getting flowers, but, oh, yep, that's a fruit. So that's set of fruit. I think something's eating the fruit off of them too. I just haven't seen the fruit last very long on here. So I think something's coming over and using this as its snack cabinet. The plant overall seems to be at least relatively healthy. and still producing flowers and still producing fruit, even in this hot summer sun. You'll notice there's this damage here, and I've shown this before, but that's definitely flea beetle damage. And so when you see this kind of damage, the recommendation is to just come out and look for flea beetles on it and squish them whenever you find them if you can. They're pretty fast little buggers. But yeah, this is a very happy, healthy eggplant. Here's another one. This one's significantly shorter, but it's still a pretty good sized eggplant. Those of you in northern climates are probably like, are you kidding me? That's the biggest eggplant I've ever seen. Eggplant bush that I've ever seen. But this one has probably about, I'd say roughly 3 feet in height for that highest bit back there. And it's absolutely producing fruit. This is fun. This is like a little fairy eggplant. The problem is it's so hot. These little guys are maturing too quickly, so they'll get to, that big, and then they'll start changing color. And then when they change color, that's when they get bitter. So you have to pick them pretty quickly, and I've missed the window a couple times, and mostly we've had bitter eggplant off of this plant. And you'll see the plant's not in perfect health. Like, this is a good healthy leaf. This is not a healthy leaf. It's in distress. It's got probably spider mites or something on it. And that's okay. I mean, the plant's still okay. One of the plants that is the healthiest, or at least seems to be pretty happy in this heat, is this cantaloupe plant. This is or melon plant. This is a Israeli something, cantaloupe plant, or cantaloupe melon plant. And it's kind of cool. It's actually grown itself mostly up this. I think I put like the first one of these through the wire, but it's kind of grown itself up, so it's pretty low maintenance. And it does seem to have melons on it. I'm curious. I don't know if that's actually I haven't grown this variety before, so I don't know if that is pollinated or not. But there's one down here that's got that same brown on it, and it looks like it's getting bigger. So we'll see. But I'll probably come and tie up those melons once they get a little bigger and start putting strain on the plant. But that overall seems to be doing pretty well and seems pretty happy, certainly compared to some of my other plants. I definitely think this is an Israeli variety, and I guess that makes sense. They have a similar probably climate to ours. I think theirs is a lot drier, but it looks like this particular type of melon likes the heat. There's a few others I've grown that like the heat. This is just one that I happened to get a start for that someone gave me. So it's got fruit on it. So hopefully that's okay. It does okay, and we actually get some melons off of it. We'll see. This is the other watermelon I planted. It's in quite a bit of shade. It's very distressed down here. Seems to be happier up here, so maybe it, again, didn't get enough sun. There's this one, this is a sugar baby, I think, watermelon. Actually, I have no idea what kind of watermelon it is. That looks partially pollinated also. So this plant's not doing very well, but we'll see. This pepper plant continues to do well. I don't know if it's the variety or it's in a pretty deep pot. I keep it fairly well watered, and it's also in a decent amount of shade, and particularly the pot itself. The pot doesn't get a lot of sun, and I think that's great for avoiding drying out because it's just not getting as hot, and thus the soil isn't getting as hot and drying out with evaporation. This pot, I thought I moved it into a shadier spot and wasn't thinking about the way the sun would hit it in the afternoon. And so you'll see it's kind of wild, the sun scalding on these particular peppers. Check that out. That's sun scald. So I moved this. It was on the other side of this bed with a decent amount of afternoon sun. And I moved it over here. It looked awful. Actually, I moved it yesterday and it looked awful. But already the plant, I watered it a whole bunch too. Already there's another sun scald spot. The plant looks a lot happier and healthier just having moved it 1 day ago. So, and watering it thoroughly. So hopefully that will recover. I mentioned earlier that the peppers are turning colors more quickly. and they're smaller. So I don't know, this is about probably a pepper earlier in the season from this Hungarian sweet banana was probably about this long, and then a little bit wider overall. I don't know if the smaller peppers are due to the plant just being a little bit older. Maybe the first flush is their biggest peppers and then they get smaller as the plant gets older, or because of the heat. And so the plant's a little bit in distress. So it's maturing its peppers faster, which means not only making them smaller, but also making them change colors a lot more quickly. But absolutely, they're changing colors a lot more quickly than they were earlier in the season when it was cooler. This is my green stalk experiment. The goal is, my understanding of strawberries is if they're 3 to 5 years old, kind of about year 3, they produce the best strawberries. These strawberries are, I can't remember if they're 1 or 2 years old. They're definitely not producing anything because they're in distress. But I'm hoping that if I can keep these alive all summer and then overwinter them again, that the strawberries will actually be better next year. The plant's starting to send off runners right now, which I'm excited about. What I'll do probably is I'll cut off these runners. So see, that's a runner. That's basically a whole new strawberry plant. I'll cut them off. I've given up on trying to start anything outside. I'm going to set up an inside a seed starting space for my fall garden, and I'm going to put these runners. This is so interesting. So at first it makes one runner, then this is a second runner coming off of it. So I'll clip off this one and plant this one in the soil. You don't want to plant it too deep. Actually, I'm just going to take this off right now because it's just taking energy out of the plant. You don't want to plant it too deep because you don't want the crown right there to be under soil, but I'll do a video on planting these guys. But I'm excited this is running scapes. Normally I would pull these off because the plant is not going to produce fruit once it has these, because it's putting so much energy into these. You'll see it's not putting much energy into its fruit, and so the fruit's not doing well. But these plants are already in enough distress. They're having trouble producing good fruit anyway. And so I'm just going to take the gift of the scapes and repot those up, and I'll wait for this one to get a little more mature. Especially when they start forming roots, that's a great time to transplant them. But I'll pot these guys up, and then my plan is to hopefully fill this whole thing with strawberries generation after generation, and then I'll have a couple that are 3 or 4 years old and a couple that are new, and so I'll hopefully get continuous strawberry production, at some point in the future in these really cool green stalks. This is really interesting to me. I chopped the top off of a kale plant, see right there, earlier this spring. And I thought, there was like a little tiny green twig on it, and I thought it was pretty much done. The parent plant the original plant was covered in caterpillars, and it just looked awful. Like all the leaves were really terrible, and it was done. And so I cut that off thinking, it'll probably just be done and I'll pull out the base of the stem, but I didn't have anything else to plant in here. And it turns out it's come back in full force. I haven't really tried it. I love, let's see. Oh yeah, it's pretty bitter. So I love spring kale because it's really sweet, but summer kale is kind of bitter. I might try picking some of these and cooking them up or something, but that's not like super tasty because it's a little bit bitter. My eventual plan is to transplant this guy into my yard, but we've had so many bad freezes lately. I always like to have at least one rosemary that's in a pot that I can bring inside if there's going to be a really bad freeze, so that I always have rosemary. But I'll probably plant that one in the yard at some point soon. This green stalk is pretty much just flowers at this point. These are, I got this green stalk as a gift from my aunt-in-law, and she had been growing these lovely pink flowers, and I left them in here, just kind of trimmed them back, and they're still doing great. They definitely are appropriate for here. I don't know what they're called, but they're definitely appropriate for growing in Texas summer, and I think they provide some shade to the overall pot, which is a good thing. And these are interesting because usually snapdragons don't do very well in the Texas summer, but I think they're getting enough shade over here that they're doing pretty well. and I love the colors on them. This is like a light pink. These snapdragons are just a beautiful highlighter color. I am amazed that they have flowers this time of year because it's usually just like too hot for snapdragons in the summer. But I think they're getting just enough shade back here that they're okay. And I'm also deadheading them so that they keep producing flowers, which I think is also probably helping. If you saw my videos earlier this year, I thought this was a marble of Peru. It's either not a marble of Peru, it's something else, or it's in too much shade maybe to produce flowers. The marble of Peru's produce really pretty flowers. This doesn't seem to be doing that, so either I've incorrectly diagnosed which plant it is, or it's, not got proper fertilization or water or sun or whatever. This is my Genoese basil. I've tried to put this in as much shade as I can, but and it's doing a little bit better now, but I think it was just in so much distress from lack of water, um, and I've let it bolt, and it's just gotten woody. Like, see how dark those wood stems are down there? Once it goes woody like that, this isn't going to taste good. It's going to have a more bitter kind of tone to it, and the plant's just overall in distress. These aren't beautiful basil leaves that I want to use in a dish right now, and they won't be. This won't recover. What I really need to do is just pull it out and start over, but I haven't gotten around to it yet. Probably what I'll do actually is harvest the seeds off of this, re-amend the soil, bring it inside, start a whole bunch of basil seeds in it, and then bring it back out in September or so. So my garden tour today is a little bit more in depth than ones that I've done in the recent past. And part of that is because I really want to show you what the true middle of Texas summer looks like in the garden. Also, I was doing this every week, but the garden season is so much more exciting and constantly changing in the spring. And right now, it's just so brutally hot. It's hard to get out here and do an hour-long video. And also, there's less interesting stuff changing in the garden this time of year because things are, they're just under a lot more stress, and so it's harder for them to grow. So I'm going to try to do probably one more garden video. So we're doing mid-July right now. I'll probably do mid-August. And then I'll start doing more frequent garden videos once we start the fall garden. I'll do some other types of videos, but the garden tours I'll probably just do every 3 or 4 weeks here in the summer when it's so hot and stressful for the garden and me. Nope, not talking about Johnson grass. We're just not. I battle this so frequently, but right now it's so hot. I can't. And it's taking over. Yeah. This is my sweet potatoes, and I'm really excited about these. This is the bed where I did a video on how to plant sweet potatoes, and I'm curious to see which of my beds does the best with the sweet potatoes. I have a suspicion. I think I know which one is going to do the best, but this garden bed gets a good amount of sun. It's almost hard to tell where the sweet potatoes end and the morning glories begin. Those are not the morning glories that I plant. Those are more of like a weed type morning glory that's going up there, but actually sweet potatoes and morning glories are related. So they're plants that are in the same family. And so that's part of the reason why it's hard to tell where one ends and the other begins, because they're actually related. But overall, I think these sweet potatoes look pretty good. They're vining really well. My only concern is it has been so hot and it's hard to keep this bed watered. I've come over here and it's felt pretty dry a few times, and I think that may result in a less than brilliant crop, but we'll see. I'm looking forward to digging these guys up in the fall and just kind of seeing how we did, basically. These garden beds, oh, yeah, ouch. This guy over here is definitely, I think I just need to put a lot more soil in it next year. The eggplant is doing okay. I do think something's eating these eggplants once they actually fruit, because they don't look, oh, there's my shadow, because I haven't really gotten any fruit off of them. And there's a fair amount of sun over here. I mean, this guy gets sun most of the day, and it is a different variety, but I don't think it's doing as well as the other eggplant. I'm not going to pull it out or anything, though. The leaves are a lot healthier than the ones on the other side of the garden, one, and two, sometimes I get flush of crop in the fall after the garden has survived the summer. So it's all stressed during the summer, but by the fall, it gets a little bit less stress, but it's got a really established root base, lots of leaves on it. It's a bigger plant. And so sometimes I'll actually get the crop from my eggplants in the fall after it cools down rather than in the summer in the middle of the heat, which is when you would expect to get them. But again, Texas is really hot. Like, we're not 90 degrees in the summer. We're not 80 degrees in the summer. We're over 100 degrees, at least this year. And so I don't think we're going to get a ton of eggplant in the middle of the summer, but I do think we will get some in the fall once the plant is under less stress. The other thing I'm frustrated about, I was hoping this green bean plant would kind of go nuts and take over this area. It hasn't. It's struggling. I think it's just too hot for it. I mean, if you feel these leaves, they're literally, I need to water this more, but yeah, this is, plus out of town for a week and everything kind of, yeah, look at that. I can just literally, wow, that's dry. I need to water that. Okay, zucchini, I think we're done. I think the zucchini are done for the year. There's a couple of, you'll see back in the back there, the netting, there's a couple of holes back there. I think some vine borers got in and got to the plants. I also haven't been as good about, the netting in the front either, as the plants got so big. And so I think a couple of vine borers got in, laid some eggs, and we lost the crop. But I still got more crop than I've ever had before. And I absolutely think I'm going to start a few plants and replant these guys in the fall and give it another go with the bug netting on. I think that was a winning solution for sure. If I had to place a bet, I would probably bet on this sweet potato plant doing the best, or the sweet potato bed doing the best. And yeah, I've planted a lot of sweet potatoes this year, but I was kind of looking for something that would survive the summer on low maintenance, and that's what we have here. These sweet potato plants were planted a little bit later than the other ones, but they seem to be doing really, really well. There's definitely some yellowing on leaves, but kind of what isn't in the middle of the summer. And especially the leaves that are kind of running off back behind the plant over here look really healthy. And I know historically this bed kind of maintains water really well, and that I think it does really well in the summer heat. So because it also gets a fair amount of shade. So I think overall these sweet potatoes are probably going to have the least high heat stress. And so I think they're probably going to do the best. But we shall see, and it will be a fun experiment to determine what happens. This plant down here has really surprised me. And I planted this, I think it's called an aster, a couple years ago, and it keeps coming back. And especially in the summer and then in the fall, it looks absolutely brilliant. And I'm amazed by it every year because it kind of dies back in the winter and then it comes back and has these pretty purple flowers on it. And it just kind of keeps filling this space, which is lovely because it seems like a lot of the other things I plant here seem to struggle. This coneflower also, this had maybe 2 flowers on it last year. Did not expect it to overwinter or over summer at all. And sure enough, this year I've had beautiful bouquets out of it, and it seems to be a perennial. So I'm really thrilled. I hope it keeps going. Definitely worth having space in my garden for this guy. These are really beautiful flowers to put in a vase. And I'm really enjoying it because it's basically just free flowers that I didn't really do anything to get to show up. So I'm really excited about it. This is another volunteer flower that this one seems to be doing kind of the best of my volunteer sunflowers. It gets the most sun. The only thing with sunflowers that especially this variety, which I'm pretty sure a squirrel planted this, so who knows what variety it is. But it's actually kind of hard to pick these to put in a vase because usually there's one that's dying, one that's alive, and then a couple more that if I cut too far into this vase, I'm going to kill all those little babies that are coming. So I haven't really decided what to do here with these kinds of flowers, but I do enjoy at least seeing them in the yard. I know my husband, as you can tell, probably hates mowing around them, but hey, when everything else is in distress in the garden, it's nice to see a friendly flower face, I suppose. I have a bit of a love-hate relationship with this fig bush right now. It seems to be doing really well. I mean, it's healthy, it has lots of fruit on it, the fruit looks healthy, but I don't get any fruit off of it. It was producing fruit on a regular basis for a few months, and it's still got a ton of fruit on it. I mean, just there's clusters everywhere of figs. But the reality is the squirrels are getting them all, and I'm not getting any. So I love this fig bush. It's beautiful, it's big, it's healthy, it's happy, it's got tons of figs on it. Um, but I'm not getting any figs, which makes me sad. I wish I could get some figs, but that doesn't seem to be in the cards this year, even with all the figs on the tree. So we'll see. Maybe in the fall, magically I'll get a few. I think I've had like maybe 5 total, which is really sad because I think this tree has probably produced at least 100 that squirrels have either eaten prematurely or right when they're ripe. So frustrating, but it is kind of what it is. Definitely thinking about planting more coneflowers. This coneflower is looking really nice. This coneflower has survived. It's not looking particularly healthy, certainly not as healthy as the other one, but this pot dries out quite a bit, so that's definitely the reason. But still, I mean, even with the distress that it's been in, there's still a decent plant here with quite a few flowers on it. So I think I'm gonna probably grow more coneflowers in the future. Seems like a thing that does well here in Texas. This is another interesting one. This is just a stalk flower, and I got these on sale a year and a half ago, maybe. Planted them in the garden bed. They didn't look great. They look kind of sad, and then they established their roots over the winter and really flourished. And I'm pretty excited about them. I'm just going to kind of let this bed continue to be stock flowers for now and until they decide they don't want to be here anymore. My original plan with this bed was to grow a bunch of tomatoes, or not tomatoes, strawberries, but I've got a few plants still in here, but they don't seem to be doing as well as I thought they would over here. So green stock it is, I think, for the strawberries. Oh, well, that concludes my garden tour for July. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I love getting to talk through my garden, even when honestly it's a little bit stressful. This time of year, it's just so hard to see my plants struggle. It's so hard to figure out kind of what to do in the middle of summer in Texas. I've got something, and I've got a lot that's doing really, really well. I've got great peppers. It looks like I'm going to get some melons. My tomatoes are absolutely done, but that's okay. I'll start another tomato garden actually in the fall. And the nice thing about starting a few things in the fall is there's less pest pressure overall. Even the squirrels seem less interested in my tomatoes in the fall. So I'll probably do that. But the summer is stressful, these couple of months, and especially when the 100-degree heat starts in June. So I just want to say to you gardeners that are in Texas or in another place that's really hot right now, and while all of those beautiful gardens in the Pacific Northwest and Michigan and everywhere else are flourishing, we're basically in kind of the dead of winter in some ways. Not the dead of winter, but we're kind of in almost a winter season or winter equivalent season in Texas because it's so hot. So just give that some grace. Realize that it's not you, it's the weather. And if you can just kind of eke a few of your plants along. I've historically had peppers that didn't do as well in the spring. I got them to survive the summer and then they did well in the fall. So as long as the plant survives the summer with some amount of health to it, often you'll end up getting the crop for things like peppers, eggplants, things like that in the fall. Tomatoes, usually I just completely restart because my tomato plants get so much disease and so much stress in the summer, and they just don't handle stress nearly as well as my peppers and my eggplants. So I usually do start a full new fresh crop of tomatoes in the summer, or in the summer actually. I'll be starting those in a couple of weeks, and then I'll have a fall garden. And so for those of you that are just stressed, it's summer, it's hot, go enjoy the summer, go to the pool, don't spend as much time in the garden. Uh, Watch those lovely, zucchini and things like that from those Michigan gardens and realize that we still have like 140 days or something until our next frost date. So if we start some things indoors and kind of get those ready for our fall garden, we'll still have a second shot at things. That's the cool thing about cool maybe not cool, but that is the cool thing about hot Texas summers is we do have a longer growing season, and so we'll get a second chance in the fall. I really like to think of we have a spring season, we all kind of take a break in the summer, or at least the plants do, or they just kind of go dormant a little bit from like July to late August. And then things start cooling down a little bit in September. And then usually by the end of September, we're starting up and replanting our fall garden. And we get a second shot. So anyway, I hope that this was a little bit inspirational, not too depressing, and I hope you enjoyed it. I certainly enjoyed giving you guys a tour of my garden, and I hope you have a wonderful day. And I will update you on the garden in August. Ooh, let's see what it looks like then. Thanks. Have a great one. Bye.